more action. If you want more action in your fantasy stories and you don't really care about Dark Lords or things like that, you just want to see some people hack some heads off, then you should read these books. The first one, I like to think of it as, it's like a dumbed down version of Lord of the Rings. You know, you have your three characters. That's basically Gimli, Aragorn, and Legolas. And this spawned a series called Dragonlance, and the first one is Dragons of Autumn Twilight. And this is like its own trilogy, so yeah, get that if you just want, you know, people killing each other. But this one, these series, okay, Robert E. Howard, he wrote in the time of Pulp Fiction, and Robert E. Howard, he single-handedly created his own genre called sword and sorcery. Now, sword and sorcery is basically the opposite of what Tolkien wrote. Tolkien wrote something that was very expansive and elaborate, and that's called like high fantasy. This is more like low-key fantasy, where you just have some guy and he's like in the fantasy world, but you don't really know much. There's no expansion on the fantasy world. You don't really care about the fantasy world. You care about the adventure in the fantasy world. And he actually created Conan the Barbarian. So if you want to read about Conan, you should read this book first, the Conan Coming of the Cimmerian, whatever. But he also wrote a bunch of other cool characters like Cole, Exile, and Atlantis. Then Solomon Kane, who's kind of like an early version of Indiana Jones. He's like this Puritan philosopher dude who like kills monsters. It sounds weird, but it's fucking awesome. They're coming out with a new Conan the Barbarian movie. If you go to the theaters, they have a trailer for a new movie, and I hope it does well. I hope it has some references to the actual novels. These aren't actual full. This isn't a one book. These are short stories. All of these are short stories. All the Conan stories, Solomon Kane, Cole, everything are just like a series of short stories. So that last one is from Forgotten Realms. Forgotten Realms, I know a lot of friends who are kind of like, oh, not this guy again, because Forgotten Realms, I think, came from Dungeons and Dragons, and there's this whole nerdy thing. I don't even know. I just know some people who don't really like this, but I like it. This specific character is a famous character in fantasy created by R.A. Salvatore, and the main character is like this dark elf. He created this whole world of like dark elves living underground, and this one elf, he grew up with a sense of, you know, courage and nobility and things like that, and his name was Dritz. And then his whole first series, which begins with Homeland, and then it goes on. Book 2 is Exile, and the last one's Sojourn. That whole trilogy is about Dritz escaping the underworld to go into the overworld because he doesn't like living in the underworld, and he's, you know, he's a good person. The last category that I have is called Something Different. This is basically something different. If you're tired of like elves and dwarves or whatever, I read this when I was really little, so I don't even remember most of it. It's called Redwall, and by Brian Jacques. This is the first book in it. It's called Redwall, but it's set in also a place called Redwall, and it's basically, you know, fantasy adventure, but it's all with animals. You know, cute little mouse and evil rats and things like that, and talking owls, and yeah, it's just, you know, cute, different, yeah. This guy just published his book like 2 years ago, so this guy's very new, David Anthony Durham. I haven't read it yet, but the first few pages were very promising. It's called Kakassiik, it's, yeah, one of those. It's another trilogy, book 1 of the blah 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 whatever. It's about these kids where they get separated after their father dies from an assassination, and Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is weird. It's different. It's like dark fantasy, but it's set in like, you know, Victorian England, I think, or something like that. Yeah, 1806, Napoleonic Wars. So it kind of has like that history and fantasy, and it's really good. I like it. I like it a lot. Susanna Clarke. So get that if you want something like history into your fantasy, something like that. It's pretty long, but it's very entertaining. Saved the best for last. This I just think you should read, even if you, I mean, forget it if it's something different. This is just absolutely hilarious, satirical. It's great. It's Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett and his Discworld series. Now, his books don't officially have, like, you know, any sense of ordering to them. Well, okay, that's a lie. They do, because the first character that he wrote in his first book, The Color of Magic, fans really loved his main character, and his name was Rincewind. And Rincewind is basically like this inept, kind of stupid wizard, and he gets into all sorts of trouble. And I just want to put this out there: if you ever want to read Terry Pratchett, this is the order that you should read the books, because these are all about Rincewind, and they follow a certain order. So you have the color of magic, like fantastic, sorcery. Eric's not officially about Rincewind, but Rincewind is involved, so interesting times. This one's probably my favorite. And then finally, The Last Continent. I haven't read Terry Pratchett in a while, so I don't know if he continued anything that has Rincewind appearing in it, but that order, that's the best in fantasy comedy writing ever. You don't have to read it in a sense in this order, but there are some things that they refer to that you might not understand at first, because, like, for example, he gets stuck on this place, but you won't understand how he got stuck until you read to the end of Interesting Times. But all these other books and all these other unique characters that appear in the same universe, and it's all about this place called Discworld, where the world is flat and these 4 elephants are carrying it on a floating turtle. Who knows why? No one knows why. And it's very funny. It's very satirical, and it's British humor. I think is the best humor. It's that dry, subtle humor. But that's the thing. Like, since it's like a different kind of humor than us Americans, some people I know won't probably get some of the jokes, because they'll be like, what? Because it's sometimes hard to put a joke in a book, because, you know, some things derive on like visual puns or things like that, but Terry Pratchett pulls off humor very nicely, and it's kind of like a sophisticated humor. So, and that's it that I have that I'm going to talk about for fantasy books. Hope you have a great week, and go read!